We're doing Parsha Shoftim. It says Shoftim v'shotrim titein lecha v'chal sharecha, right? Which means judges and policemen you should have in every gate. Asher Hashem Elokecha nosen lecha, that God gives to you. What does it mean that God gives to you? That means in Israel. God gave us the land of Israel. So every city in the land of Israel, you should have judges and policemen at the gates. Why? Traditionally, in history, you had the court system at the entrance of the city. That's where the court was. So you'd have the judges would sit at the entrance to the city, right? And and what are the policemen for? So the policemen are there, as Rashi tells us, to enforce the laws, while the judges are there to be able to administrate them and to be able to decide, right? It says if people are not doing mitzvahs, right? So the police come and push them to do mitzvahs, right? Because it's a theocratic society, a society run by Torah. So in a society run by Torah, what do the police do? They can make sure you go to shul on time, right? They make sure you put on your tefillin. They make sure that you keep Shabbos. Whatever it is that they're looking at, that's what they're there for. And then it says, "Shiftu esa'am mishpat tzedek," you should judge the people righteously. Of course, how else are you going to judge them? You're going to judge them poorly. So the next sentence tells you, "Lo sita mishpat v'lo takir panim lo tikach shochet." You should not push away judgment. You shouldn't recognize faces, literally, and you should not take bribery. That is to say, you shouldn't say, "I'm not going to hear this case," because you don't want to, because you know, for instance, that somebody you know is wrong. Or it's a politically charged case. Let's say you have a case where if you judge correctly, you're going to get in trouble because though everybody likes this guy, let's say, right? So that you can't do that. Or don't recognize faces. That is, don't play favorites. Don't say that you have a case and somebody comes and he's a friend of yours, so you judge in his favor, right? You don't do that. And the third is don't take bribes. You don't allow someone to bribe you. So of course that's pretty simple. If somebody gives you money, you're not going to be able to judge them favorably. But it goes beyond that. It says, because bribery blinds the eyes of the wise and pushes off the words of the righteous. That is, so it doesn't mean here that it's only talking about money. That you I go to a judge and I say, "Listen, judge this case my way. I'll make $1 million. I'll give you $100,000. Judge my way." Right? So that's of course simple. But it says that the rabbis, the Gemara, explain it differently. They explain that when it talks about bribery, bribery means anything that somebody does for you that causes you to favor them. Anything. So to give stories, they say one fellow used to come and used to give the judge, he was like a farmer, and he used to come every week on Thursday, and he'd bring the judge vegetables. And the judge paid for them, right, every Thursday. One week, the guy has to come early, so he brings the judge vegetables on Wednesday. So the judge says, "I can't hear a case with you because you've just bribed me. You didn't mean to bribe me, right? You were just helping yourself because you came to town on Wednesday instead of Thursday. But for me, you did me a favor. You gave me my vegetables a day early. I can't judge you now." It tells another case where he lets him walk in front of him. "Yeah, I can't judge you now." Like all these very minor little things. So you say, do you really think that these great rabbinic leaders who were judges would allow themselves to be bribed by such a small little thing? It's not money. It's not anything. The people are acting in the normal courtesy you'd act to a judge or to a person. So the answer is that it's not telling us specifically how these people could not control themselves and therefore they would not judge the case. It is telling us how seriously they take gratitude. If someone does something for you, you're supposed to show gratitude. Right? If most of us, we don't think much of it. A mailman comes and delivers your mail. The guy comes and delivers your newspaper. So should you have gratitude for a guy delivering your newspaper? You're paying him to deliver your newspaper. But the fact is that you should. Because he's doing it right. You're getting it in the morning when you wake up. Right? That's it. You can have a newspaper delivered. I had it for a while. The guy delivered the newspaper. I was gone already. I left for shul by the time the guy would deliver the newspaper. So what do I need a newspaper for? I'd come home at 6 o'clock at night and read the news. It's already a day late. So you show gratitude to people even if they're paid, even if it's expected. When you make dinner at home, right? You expected you make dinner. You've been making dinner every night for how many years? Nevertheless, people should say thank you. They should show gratitude, right? That's a Jewish idea. I mean, everyone should do this, but it's a Jewish idea. So these rabbis are, in this case, weren't saying we can't control. It's not that we can't control ourselves. We can, if somebody goes and he simply brings me my vegetables a day early, I can still judge him fairly. But you have to keep in mind that I want to show gratitude to this person because he did something for me, even though he didn't really do it for me. He did it for himself, but it helped me. So because I take gratitude so seriously, I can't judge his case because I have to show him gratitude. I have to thank him. I have to make it actually appear that I care for what he did, because I do, but I have to show it. And therefore they couldn't judge it. So it teaches us an important lesson. It's not that our leaders and our rabbis were unable to be logical. It's that it's how important gratitude is. So even if someone does something for you that's not a favor, it's something that they have to do anyways. By virtue of the fact that they do it, you show gratitude to them. You can go into a store and it can be a pain in the neck. Or you can go into a store and a person is very helpful and gets you what you want at the best price and is very good about it. You get the same totally different experience in the same store. In both cases, you're paying for it, you're buying it. You go out to eat and they can throw the food in front of you or they can make it nice. If they make it nice, we should show gratitude, right? That's the whole tipping idea. Right? That's why we tip. We tip people because we want them to know that we appreciate what they do for us beyond the letter of the law. So that's what it's talking about here.
Rabbi, as a matter of interest, talking about the tipping, in South Africa we always have, they still have, and we were used to it, if we went to a wedding, the men would all, or there were only single women, everybody would throw in, 10 rand, here would be $10, $15, and to give it to the server
on the table.
Whoever used to come, if there was somebody especially for the drinks and someone, we'd give half to the one and half to the other. And we arrived here in Canada all prepared to do it.
No, at my house you have to do it.
Even on Shabbos?
Well, I'll take an IOU.
I'll give you my credit card number.
That's interesting. But but the people also paid?
Everybody.
Because extras standing.
And particularly with a lot, of course, I'm talking about the kosher caterers, I don't know about the others, but they had a lot of the youth who were in the highest standards who used to work for them as waiters.
That's right.
And these guys always used to, depend a lot on it to help pay for
it. Was like in the Jewish hotels in the Catskills. It was like that. They were in Montreal. They had these hotels where basically the waiter could give you as much food as you wanted, could do anything you wanted, and in the end they got tipped. But they got tipped a lot of money. Right? So like if you ever read Mordechai Richler's books or saw the movie about Duddy Kravitz, right? The whole premise of the movie is that he goes to work in a hotel, and the first guy he meets takes a $100 bill. This is in the 1950s, and tears it in half, and gives him the one half of it when the guy comes to visit, and he says, if you do give us good service the whole week that we're here, I'm going to give you the other half when I leave. Right? So that's like today is like giving a waiter $500. Right? It'd be $1,000 from then. So we go on now. It says it's in sentence 20 with like the fourth line. It says tzedek tirdof l'man tichya, right? Righteousness you should pursue in order that you should live. So what's the Torah telling us here? First thing you see, it repeats the words, and the Torah never repeats a word or a letter unless there's a reason. The Torah is as concise and specific as possible. So here if it says tzedek tirdof, there are many interpretations for this. We'll do two. The one that is the most common, but I think is very, very, very poignant, is that when it says tzedek tirdof, righteousness you should follow. One of the commentators, the Kotzker Rebbe, says, im tzedek lo tzedek tirdof, with righteousness to righteousness you should follow. So what he's saying is, there's one thing, you want to go, like I use this example all the time. A guy wants to go and buy his wife flowers for Shabbos. Right? It's the right thing to do, to buy her flowers for Shabbos. So he goes over to the plaza here, but he's such a hurry, he parks in the fire lane. And he runs in to get flowers. In the meantime, nobody can get past him. So all the cars are backing up onto the street, and all the cars in the parking lot are stuck there. Because he decided he's in such a hurry, he has to buy his wife flowers. So he's doing something righteous, but he's doing it in a non-righteous way. Right? A guy goes to shul, like in New York, in a big city, in order to go to shul during the week, right, you need to park. So you end up parking the street. So you go up and you see all the spots are gone. You say, well, look, if everybody's coming here for mincha, I'm also coming for mincha. So I'll park my car, I'll black somebody, but when he finishes, I finish, right? No problem. And when I'm done, I'll come out and he'll be ready to go. He won't have to wait for me. So what happens? The guy goes in, and after davening's over, somebody starts talking to him. And he's talking and talking and talking, and the other guys are outside. They can't get out now because he's double parked on them. So he's doing something righteous. He's going to shul, but he's doing it in a way that's not righteous, right? And we have to make sure that when we do a good thing, that we do it in a good way, right? We can't go and say, but what do you want from me? I'm doing a mitzvah anyways, right? It's like the person who steals and then he gives tzedakah with that money, right? You might be doing a good act, but you're not doing it in a good way, and it's very important, right? We go into the store and we treat the person the cash register poorly. Right? We're not impressing anybody. We might be doing a mitzvah, getting ready for Shabbos, but we're not doing it in a nice way, and therefore this line says it's not enough to do the right thing. You have to do the right thing in the right way. That's what's important. That's what it's telling us. That's one of them. Another one is that it goes on the third word, tirdov. Tzedek, tzedek, tirdov. Righteousness, righteousness you should follow. Tirdov really doesn't mean follow. It is to follow, but it comes from the word rodef. And rodef is a murderer. Not just a murderer, but it's a murderer who pursues someone. Like a guy running after somebody with a knife. That's a rodef. Somebody who happens to kill someone in the spur of the moment is not a rodef. That's a rotzeach, a murderer. This is a pursuer. I'm running after someone with a knife to kill him. So here it says, righteousness, righteousness, you should run after in that way. Right? What does it mean you should run after it like that? That word is a very negative word. Yeah, a person who's a rodef is running to kill someone. So he's saying that when it comes to righteousness, you should pursue it with the same enthusiasm as we often do for things that we are either forbidden or are just permission. Like, if somebody invites you that says, I want to take you out to dinner to a real nice restaurant, so you run to go, right? So that type of desire to go to the restaurant should be the same kind of desire we use to go to shul, or to do a mitzvah, or to give charity. The same feeling, the same desire, I can't wait to do this. So the way that we run after doing something for ourselves, we should run after it for a mitzvah. So that's why it says, tzedek, tzedek, tirdov. You should run after it. You should pursue it in order that you should live in the land that Hashem gave to you. Next it says, this parsha, by the way, is like chock full of mitzvahs. It's like one after another. There's like 80 mitzvahs in this parsha, an enormous number. Every line is another one. So here it says, in number 21, Lo sita lecha ashera, you should not plant a ashera, which is a kind of a tree. Call eitz, a type of a tree. Eitz al mizbeach Hashem Elokecha, near the altar of God. Well, why not? You take an altar, and you're going to offer a sacrifice to God. So you shouldn't plant a tree next to it that's called an ashera. It's a certain type of a tree. I don't know what type it is in English, but it's a certain type of a tree. So it says, why is that? It says because the idol worshippers, in the old days, they didn't have neon signs like we have in billboards and said, worship idols 2 miles down the road, then 1 mile, half a mile, turn left here, there's the idol. How'd they do it? They would plant this tree next to the idol, and the tree would grow very fast because that's the kind of tree it was. And people who were coming, wanted to find out where they could worship an idol, would look for the tree because the tree was tall. And they'd see the tree and they'd go. So it says we're not allowed to plant such a tree next to our altar. We can't go and say, All right, so if they do that, well, we want people to know where our altar is. We're worshiping God, so let's put a tree next to that so people will see it. He says, no, you can't do that. Why not? Because it's copying them. It's like if you have you live in a country where, let's say, Christianity is the main religion, and they all have these big churches with the real tall steeples. So we shouldn't go and say, well, why do they make the steeples on the churches? Because the church should be the highest building in the city, they'd say. So wherever you are, you can look up and see it. That's how they did it. So we say, well, we also want people to come to our city and see where the synagogue is. So we'll build a steeple there too. So you don't do that, because then you're copying the religion of another religion, and in this case it's idol worship, right? When you're dealing with a tree, so therefore we're not allowed to plant such a tree there, right? So what it's telling us, though, an important thing, that not only is it forbidden to worship idols, it's forbidden to do something that attracts people to worship idols. And in fact, in last week's parsha, we had a similar idea. We had a thing called a mesis, last week's parsha. That's a person who dedicates themselves to convince Jews to practice other religions other than Judaism. Right? A Jew who tries to convert Jews to other religions or to other practices. Maybe not to be religious at all, but they try to do that. That's what they try to do. That's their goal, to try to accomplish that. And that person is considered one of the worst people in Jewish history. The Torah says such a person should be killed.
Yeah, even the Jews for J.
Yeah, most of them don't know better, and most of them aren't even Jewish. But those who are, yeah, it's the same idea.
But at that rally, I saw it was funny with the Jews for Judaism.
Yeah.
I saw the guy talking to the Jews for J. Yoska lady. They were having a big conversation. I said, wow, getting on. He said, no, I've taken her phone number. I think he was going to phone her to try and convince her that she must leave it.
Uh-huh. So the idea is not only a person who actually converts Jews, it's called a mesis, but a person who tries to. Just trying is sufficient to be a mesis, which is a person who should be killed according to Jewish law. So in this we understand something very interesting. In Judaism, there's a concept of a balance. Everything has a balance. So like for every good thing, right, you can have a negative thing. So for instance, somebody needs tzedakah, you give them tzedakah, right? So money becomes a very positive force, right? Or you can take money and you can pay someone to kill somebody. Right? Money is now a very negative force. Money is not good or bad. Money is how you use it, right? So if you use it for good, right, it becomes a mitzvah. You use it for bad, it's evil, right? Everything has two sides to it. So we see, for instance, a person who tries to take Jews away from Judaism is the opposite of a person who tries to bring Jews to Judaism, right? To take Jews and help them be religious. The opposite, right? So if we say that a person who actually takes Jews and converts them away from Judaism is the worst thing in the world, then a person who brings Jews to Judaism is one of the best things in the world. If a person who takes people away from Judaism is unsuccessful, he only tries to do it, but he doesn't accomplish it, he's still considered a terrible person, which means then a person who tries to bring people closer to Judaism but fails is still considered to be a wonderful person. Which now tells us that when it comes to reaching out to people, it's not our job to change them. It's our job to introduce them to Judaism, to present it to them in a good light, right? An honest light, but a good light, and that's it. The rest is up to them. If they decide to do it, great. If they don't decide to do it, that's up to them. But the bottom line is, your job is not to change them. Your job is to introduce them and to educate them, and then we hope that they'll take the step. And if all you do is educate them, and a single person that you've approached, not one of them changes, you still receive a reward as if they did, just like the opposite of the person who takes people away. That's the idea that it's talking about here. Okay. So if we look now on 102.6 and 102.7, where it says the rebellious elder, right, number 8. If a matter of judgment is hidden from you, between blood and blood, between verdict and verdict, between plague and plague, matters of dispute in your cities, you shall rise up and ascend to the place that Hashem your God shall choose. right? So let's say you have a question. You don't know the answer to a religious law. Is this chicken kosher or not kosher? Maybe there's something wrong with the chicken. I don't know. It looks like there's a problem. So I have to go get the answers. So he says, you go to the place that Hashem chooses. You shall come to the Kohanim, the Levites, and the judge who will be in those days. Depending on the question, you have to know who to go to. The judge or the Levite or the Kohen. But then it says, who will be in those days? Right? So here you're going to go to the judge who's alive then. Does anyone think you should go to a judge who's dead? Of course you go to a judge who's alive. How are you going to get an answer from a judge who's dead? Right? Or a judge who's not born yet? So what's the Torah telling you, the judge in those days? What's the message to us? There's no other judge you can go to except for a judge who's a judge then. I can't say, okay, I'm going to go to Moshe. But Moshe's been dead for 2,000 years. Doesn't matter. I'm still going to go to him. Well, you can't. He's not in those days. That's ridiculous. The Torah wouldn't say that. The Torah is telling us an important thing. We understand, and this happens in every generation, when we're young and we look at the great rabbis of our generation, they seem like amazing, extraordinary. Like, I look at the rabbis from pre-Europe who lived through the war and who came here. They were almost like supermen. And then when they started to die out, and now they're almost all gone, we start saying, who's going to lead us now? Who's the rabbis going to lead us? Right? You had Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, you had Rabbi Rothman, you had these great, great, great Torah leaders. They're all dead. Who's going to lead us now? So if we look at it that way, we're never going to have anyone lead us. Because I can promise you, the ones who will lead us now, my kids are going to say that about them. They're going to say, when those people die, they're going to say, how are we supposed to live? This rabbi and this rabbi and this rabbi all died. Right? And I'm saying that those rabbis, they're nothing compared to the ones before them. So the Torah is telling you, you go to the judges, you go to the rabbis, you go to the Kohen of your time. Because the one of your time might seem to you to not be like the ones from before, but they are invested with the same power and authority as the ones from before. And therefore you go to them. Don't go and say, who am I going to go to? There's no rabbis today worth going to. It's not true. There are. Hashem makes sure that there are people who have the ability and have the knowledge and have the understanding, have the righteousness to be able to answer our questions and to lead us. It just doesn't appear like that to us, but that's the case. And that's why it says you will go to the judges in your time, because it's telling you just that. And you should do according to the word that they will tell you from that place that Hashem will choose. And you should be careful to do according to everything that they teach you. According to the teaching, they will teach you, and according to the judgment, they will say to you, shall you do. You shall not deviate from the word that they tell you, right or left. Rashi says, what does it mean they shouldn't deviate right or left? What if you go to the rabbi and he says, your left hand is your right hand is your left hand? And you know he's wrong. You say, your left hand is your left hand, not your right hand. So what do? It says here you don't deviate right from left. In other words, if they're telling you something, there's a message there. There's a reason for it. If they're telling you your right hand is your right hand, then your right hand, your right hand. They're saying your left hand's your right hand, then your left hand's your right hand. I don't mean that we follow blindly. We don't. What it's saying is that there's messages. Like there's one place it says here in this parsha that you have to be tamim, you have to be complete before people and God. You shouldn't like be tricky and have all types of convolutions as to how I'm going to figure out how to do what I do. Just be straight, right? That's honest, straight. So it tells a story with King Solomon that one time a fellow came to King Solomon and said, that he knew that King Solomon could talk to all the animal kingdom. He understood how to converse to every animals. So the guy said, I want you to teach me how to talk to birds. King Solomon said, no, I'm not going to teach you. He says, no, I want you to teach me. He says, no, you're going to misuse it. And he says, no, I will use it correctly. So finally he teaches him. And it says the guy goes out and he hears the bird say, this guy here, pointing at him, he has 200 cows and they're all going to die next week. So the guy hears it, right? So he goes, what does he do? He takes his 200 cows and he sells them. And they died the week after. Right? So he says, this is great. I get all the answers. So he's going next and he goes and he hears the bird saying, you see this guy here? His house is going to burn down and everything in it's going to be lost next week. So the guy says, oh no, So he goes, takes his house, he sells it, and the next week it burns down, but it was somebody else's house. So then the guy goes back into the woods a couple days later, and the birds say, hey, you see that guy there? He's going to die. He's going to die now. And he goes running back to King Solomon, and he said, I don't want to know how to talk to birds. He said, I'm going to die. He said, yeah, because you think you're so smart. God wanted to teach you a lesson. You needed a punishment. So what's he going to do? He's going to kill your cows. And you'd feel bad, and then it took care of the punishment. But you sold the cows. So he said, oh, the next thing is then I'll have to destroy his house. That's worse than his cows, but I'll have to do that. And what you do? You sold the house before he could do it. So the only thing left that in order for God to get you to repent is he has to kill you. Because you went and you wanted to know what God's going to do before he did it. You have all of this. You have to know the future. You went and you messed everything up. You said that's the problem, right? So that idea of being in that such a way is not a positive thing. That a person should be straight, right? And that's what it's talking about here. The idea of a person should be straight. So if the rabbi tells you something that doesn't sound logical, you're allowed to question him. Right? You're allowed to ask questions about what he asks to him in a respectful way, but you have to listen to what he says. And that's why I'll have people come to me and they'll say to me, I'm not asking you a question. I just like to see if you could give me some advice. Right? It's like, why? Because if I answer a question, they feel they have to do it. So they just want to hear what I have to say. And if I say what they like, then they'll say, okay, I want to ask you a question. Right? That's how people are.
I can't believe it.
And also in this section, it talks about a king in 128 and 1029. And there it says how what the king has to do, that the king has to, is not allowed to marry too many wives, not allowed to have too many horses. He has to go everywhere with the Torah. Right? In other words, to remind himself of who he is. Because the king is powerful. The king can kill people and not be held accountable. That the Torah allows him. The king can do whatever he needs to do as the king, right, within these rules, but the Torah gives him a lot of leeway. But in order for the king to remember who he is, the Torah requires that he carry a Torah with him everywhere he goes. So he can always look into the Torah and realize how he's supposed to act. It says he shouldn't marry too many wives. It's not because he would just likes women. It's because they used to use it as a political tool. What would happen is if you had a country next to your country, you'd tell that king, I'd like to marry your daughter. Because if you marry the daughter of the king in the country next to you, he's not going to declare war on you. He's going to kill his daughter, his grandchildren, right? So you make a peace treaty by marrying each other's children. So King Solomon did that. And we know later on, King Solomon married women in order to have peace treaties in the world. But God said, you don't do this too much, right? Because you won't have control over your household. Same thing with horses. Right? Horses, meaning belongings. Why would a king want horses? Because they're regal. The king has horses. It's not, you're not going to see a king riding a donkey. So the king, but don't overdo it, it says. Right? It doesn't give you a number. It just says not to overdo it. Okay. Let's see. Okay, on 1034 and 1035, we have the Iri Miklat, the cities of refuge. What is that basically? What it basically is if a person kills someone by mistake, right, the Talmud has an expression: the guy's out chopping wood with his axe, and the head of the axe flies off and hits some guy in the head and kills him. He had no intent to kill him. He didn't want to kill him, but he killed him. Now, chances are the head of the axe flew off because he didn't check it. You should check it. Right? You shouldn't use something as dangerous without making sure you have safety done. So you have a certain amount of responsibility. On the other hand, you had no intent to hurt anyone, right? And maybe this guy was foolish for walking by when you're chopping wood, but he did. So that's called negligent homicide. In other words, you killed somebody because you were negligent. You didn't do what you should do, but you had no intent to kill them. In such a case, in the Torah, it says that he has to go to a city of refuge. He has to go live in a certain city, of which there's a number of these cities in Israel, and he has to live in that city from then on. And in that city, he's safe. Nobody can do anything to him for killing somebody by mistake. If he leaves the city, a member of the family, the person he killed, can kill him, according to the Torah. So he can't leave that city. So when does he leave the city? It says that the rule ends for a person when the Kohen Gadol dies, the high priest. When he dies, then anybody who's in the city of refuge is allowed to leave, and nobody's allowed to kill him. But if he would leave before then, right, then if he gets caught by a member of the family, they can kill him, and they're allowed to. So it's just a funny thing. It doesn't say you do it by mistake, you're going to go for 10 years. A Kohen Gadol could die tomorrow. You go in today, you could die tomorrow. Or you can go in today and you'll be the Kohen Gadol for 30 years. Why one guy gets out in a day, one guy gets out in 30 years. Right, so the Torah is telling us a very important message, that the fact that you killed someone negligently, not with intent, right, was part of a preordained thing. This person was ordained by God that they should die. But because you were acting negligently, God made it that you were the one who killed him. So you're responsible for killing him. Saying, God didn't force you to, you're responsible. But that person was going to die. So the idea is it teaches us the deeper message behind these things, that nothing happens without a reason. That, you could have, you could imagine that there's a car accident on the road. One car hits the car in front of it, right? But the car next to it gets away. So why would it be like this car gets hit and this car doesn't get hit? So it's not a simple thing. Is all of these things have gone on throughout history in order to put the right person in the right car at the right time, so that when that car gets hit, it's a just act. That person deserved it, and the person who hit them deserves it. The person who gets away without any injury, he also deserves it. He deserves to get away. Each person is that things happen. God does millions of things to cause it that the right person is in the right place at the right time. By virtue of the fact that the Kohen Gadol dies is a random thing. He could die tomorrow, he can die in 30 years, is part of the plan. God made it that you, Mr. X, are going to the city of refuge for 30 years, right? The Kohen Gadol won't die because you need to be here, right? When the next guy comes in, the Kohen Gadol can die the next day because God says you only need a day. That's how that works. Now, a problem comes up is if what we call the Goel Adam, the avenger from the family who goes after the person, right? He's pretty upset. Someone just killed his wife, right, by mistake. So he's going to want to kill this guy. So the guy runs to the city of refuge. There's nothing he can do, right? So let's say the Kohen Gadol dies the next day, and now he gets out. Now he's not allowed to kill him, but he's still as angry as he was. It's only a day later, right? And the Talmud says that a person, right, doesn't lose their emotion over a deceased person for a year. For a year. Not that you will lose it afterwards, but for sure for a year, the pain is fresh. So if somebody died, this guy's wife dies, and the guy who killed him now gets out after a day, he's still going to be mad enough to kill him. He's going to try to kill him. So why doesn't he? Why doesn't the Torah take that into account and say, you're putting this guy in a dangerous situation. You're saying that he can't kill him, and it's only been a day, right? It's one thing is, okay, after 10 years, people's emotions calm down and we get used to it and that's it. But a day? So here it's telling you, when the Kohen Gadol was a very popular person among the Jews. He was a very famous, popular, loved person. Because what he did helped us, right? He brought blessing to the world. So he was a very beloved person. When he would die, it was a national tragedy. It would be like when John Kennedy died. I don't know if any of you were here or even felt that because you weren't part of the United States, but the people in the United States they were crying in the streets because he was murdered like that. Right? It was a national tragedy. Right? It's the same idea. Right? When the Kohen Gadol died, it was a national tragedy because everybody loved the Kohen Gadol. So what the Torah is telling us is that you have personal pain, and then you have general pain. There's my family has pain, and the Jewish people are in pain. And the Talmud tells us that when the Jewish people are in pain, there's national pain that's much worse than the personal pain. We think our personal pain is worse. What are you telling me, life is so tough for everybody, right? I'm having a tough time, right? But it says that most people will overlook their personal pain when everybody's in pain, when everybody's having a problem. So here, when Gadol dies, the person who would be avenging his loved one will not have the same aggression, because he lost the Kohen Gadol now, and he feels that loss. So this is a unique thing to Jews, where Jews will feel the pain of any other Jew, regardless if we know them or not. The Kohen Gadol certainly we feel the pain for, because everybody had a relationship with him. But even in general, if I were to say to you that there's a Jew in Morocco, and the government took him and locked him up in jail, and we have to raise $100,000 to get him out of jail, would you consider giving? I think you would. Right? Maybe you don't have the money. I'm not asking you to give, but you'd consider it. But you never met this guy. He might believe in everything you hate. Right? He might think Judaism's terrible, and he might be be a criminal. He might deserve to be taken by the government. Right? You've never met him. You've never spoken to him. If you would have met him, you wouldn't have liked him. Nevertheless, you'll still do it. You'll cry for the guy. You'll give money to the guy. You'll do anything to try to get him out of prison. Why? Because he's Jewish, right? That's unique to the Jews. This is why the Talmud has it's very common to misunderstand this piece of Talmud. The Talmud tells us, it says that the Jews are called Adam, are called man, and the nations of the world are not called Adam. So you say, if I was an anti-Semite, I would read that Talmud as saying, Jews are human, but non-Jews are not human. Right? That's what it sounds like. Right? Adam was the first man. Right? So I'd say Jews are called man, right? Mankind. Non-Jews are not. Right? It's a very, very horrible statement. That's not what it means. But an anti-Semite will tell you that's what it means, and they did. They had a blood libel in Europe. There was a famous case. And one of the things that they brought up in the case to show that Jews hate non-Jews and don't consider non-Jews to be human, and therefore we can kill them and use their blood, was this piece of Talmud. Right? So one of the rabbis was asked to explain the Talmud, and this is how he explained it, and it fits what we're saying. It says, what does it mean that Jews are called Adam, but the rest of the world is not called Adam? Because who was Adam? Adam was the first human being, which means that every human being in the world is his relative. Right? You could not be a human being living in this world if you didn't come from Adam. You might not have come from Moshe, you might not have come from Abraham, but you came from Adam. Because there's no human being in the world that didn't come from Adam. Right? So for Adam, everybody is family. You're my family. I had your father, had your father, had their father, going all the way back to my child. You're part of my family. So for Adam, every human being in the world is his family. And he feels for them. So Jews are like that with other Jews. Every Jew in the world is my family. And if a Jew's in pain in Morocco, I feel it here. If a Jew needs me in Holland, I'm there to help them while I'm here. Right? We all know this. No other nation is like that. You take a Frenchman, take him out of France, let him live for 2 generations in America, and then tell him that there's a Frenchman stuck in Syria. Right? He's going to care like anybody else cares, but he has no specific interest in France. He's not French anymore. He was born in America, and his father was born in America. His grandfather came from France. What does he know about France? But a Jew, no matter how generations it is and how far away you are, Jews care. I see it all the time. The same Jews who will make fun of Judaism, and they'll fight against it, and they'll say that they don't like religious Jews, so forth and so on, they will be prepared to give up their life for Judaism. They'll do it. They do it regularly. It happens all the time, where people are like that. That's what it means that we're called Adam. Right? That means that there's a special trait that Jews have, that when one Jew is in pain, all the Jews bleed. Right? And that's what it's referring to here. When the Kohen Gadol dies, everybody feels it. Right? Everyone feels it. And therefore, your personal pain is not as significant as the national pain that you're feeling.
Yes, from Tisha B'Av, it's sort of so much more intense. In the same, sort of more so than with if you're, okay, unfortunately, one we all lost parents or
Right.
husband. And some things that, like for instance, you don't, when you're a mourner for a parent or a thing, you don't fast. Whereas in Tisha B'Av you actually fast, so it's so much more.
Right, more intense.
Yeah.
That's true. So let's go on. That 1038, 1039 talks about going to war. And here it says that when you have to go to war against your enemy, right, it says that what they had was a special Kohen. He was the number 2 Kohen, actually. And he was the Kohen who was set up specifically for war. His job was to go and stand in front of the Jews before a war and inspire them, right, and get them prepared to fight. And he was a very unique character, because here on the one hand he's a priest, he's a Kohen. On the other hand, his job is specifically to get people prepared to go to war, because our wars are holy wars. We don't go to war just to make land or make money. We went to war to guard ourselves. We went to war because God told us to. So therefore, there are holy reasons, so the Kohen does that. Now, it's an interesting thing. In most of Jewish tradition, you have inheritance laws. So, an inheritance even in jobs. Like, there's such an idea that if a rabbi has a job for so long, that when he dies, his son can have the job. It's not always the case, but it's looked at, and it's not abnormal for that to happen. Or if a person has I have a business, and Mr. X has a business and he dies, so his son takes over the business, right? It's the son's business now, right? Same too when it comes to many of the positions, even Kohen Gadol. A lot of times Kohen Gadol would die and his son would take over. But the Kohen who was set up for war, this did not happen. If you had a Kohen whose job was to go and prepare the people for war, if he died, his son did not take over. They hired the person who was the best from the Kohanim. He was the one who would take over. But why in this case is it different? And the main reason is because the job of this Kohen who goes to war, right, his job is to be brave and to make other people brave. And that's not something that you can inherit. That's something you have to develop. You have to have it in you. You have to be a leader, right, in order to do that. You can't hand that over to your children. Right? It's a very specific type of thing. So therefore, in that case, it says that person does not inherit this job. And it's the second highest job for a Kohen. The Kohen Gadol is the highest. Then you have the assistant Kohen Gadol. I mean, he's even below the Kohen who's set up for war. He's the higher level. Right? So it's considered a greater position.
Well, because I would imagine that if Kohen Gadol, the one set up for war, if it was like any other, that his son took over, that meant the families would continually be losing members as well.
Well, not necessarily. The Kohen who was set up for war didn't mean he fought the war.
Oh, I see.
He inspired people who were going to war. Because understand, the next chapter here, on the same page, starts talking about who goes to war. So it says you have to, in order to go to war, the Jews, you have to be the right age, right? You have to be like an adult. You have to be a man, and you can go to war. But there's one other rule, right? A number of other rules. You can't be within the first year of marriage, right? You marry a woman and you don't live with her, you can't go to war. You build a house and you don't live in it, you can't go to war. You have to live in the house first. You plant a vineyard and you don't reap the fruit or vegetables, then you don't go to war. There's one other one. If you're a sinner, you don't go to war. So it asks in the Talmud, what's the definition of a sinner when it comes to war? Everybody sins. So it says if you talk between putting on one part of your tefillin and your other part of your tefillin, that's considered to be a sinner. In other words, a very minor thing. So there's a famous story that's told that with Rabbi Chaim of Brisk, the first Soloveitchik. It says that he was the rabbi of a town, and one of his students came to him and said, Rabbi, the non-religious Jews are making fun of you. They made a play, and in the play they talked about the mitzvah of going to war, and they send the Kohen, the Kohen for war comes out and he gives a speech and he says, anybody who's just gotten married this year, you can go home, and they leave. Anybody who just planted a vineyard, you can go home, and they leave. Anyone who just built a house, hasn't lived in it yet, you can go home, they go home. And there's anybody who sinned, right, you can go home. And the definition of sinning. And everyone goes home except for the Chafetz Chaim and you, he says. You're the only two righteous people. See, they're making fun of you. So the Rabbi Chaim of Brisk says, they're not making fun of me. It's true. The only people who Jews say go to war are not the tough guys. They're the righteous ones. That you are, if you're a righteous person, you're the one who can go to war because God will guard you and God will make you successful. But if you're afraid to go to war because you have sins, then you can't go to war. Right? That's what the Torah says. The kind of people who went to war were righteous people. Right? Today, such a person, very few and far between, people who are righteous to this level, that they can actually go to war. It's a very serious thing. Okay, here's another one on 104.3 and 104.2. It tells us a story about the Egla Rufa. We've talked about it before, but this is where the mitzvah is. And this is what happens. Rather than reading it inside, I'll tell you the story. You have a city, right, in the ancient days. And how did you get from city to city? Either you rode on a horse or a donkey, or you walked. So a guy comes to your city for whatever reason. Let's say he's collecting charity. And he leaves. He's going to the next city. And you get up in the morning, you find he's been murdered in between the two cities. Like highwaymen can, they caught him, they killed him, they took his money, and they left him on the street, on the ground. So now, what do? Right? Somebody's responsible. So it says that the elders of the city that he left from come out and they say that we did everything we were supposed to do. What are they supposed to do? They're supposed to welcome him, to give him food, a place to stay, and accompany him as he leaves. But they clearly didn't accompany him well enough because he got killed on the road. So we did what we were supposed to do, they say, and they take this animal and they decapitate it as a sacrifice. And that's what it talks about here, because they did that happened. So it says that if whichever city the person is closer to, they're the ones who have to do it. Either the ones where he was going or the ones that he came from. Either one of them has to do this ritual of this Egla Rufa. Now this shows us, for instance, the enormous responsibility we have for other people, even nudniks. Even a guy who's a nudnik, like who's a dummy, who's going to leave, if I say to you, listen, don't go walking from here to Hamilton, because on the road outside of Toronto, there's a bunch of murderers. As soon as you leave the city, if you go out there, especially at night, they're going to catch you, they're going to kill you, they take all your money. Don't go, right? Who would go in such a case? A nudnik, a dummy, would go, right? I know better. No one's going to hurt me. Murderers like me. Nobody's going to hurt me, right? And he gets himself murdered. We're responsible to some extent, even for nudniks. Because even for the crazy person, we're responsible. We carry responsibility that they should be welcomed into our city, they should be fed, they should be given a place to sleep, they should be taken care of, and in the end, they should even be accompanied to where they're going. And if we're not going to do that, then we're not fulfilling the laws of welcoming people properly. And it's a responsibility that we have, that we need to do this. Right? When if somebody sends me a note, so such a person's in town, they need a place to stay, I should try to help, that they should be able to stay. Give them a place to stay. They shouldn't have to sleep in the street, sleep in their car. This shouldn't happen. Right? And that's what this talks about. It goes through that whole story right to the end. Now, where we had this before was in the case of Yosef. When Yosef is leaving Egypt, and his father thinks he's dead. Right? He doesn't know that he became like the number 2 guy in Egypt. So he sends a message to his fathers. It says when his brothers went back, he sent wagons filled with food and vegetables and wealth from Egypt as a gift for his father. Right? So the commentaries say, why did he send wagons? Because the word for wagon is agalot, And the last thing that Yosef had studied with his father was this section called the Egla Arufa. And Agalot and Egla are the same letters. So this way he was sending a message to his father in a sort of a secret way that I'm alive. If my brothers come back and say to you, Dad, you're not going to believe it, Joseph's alive. So he's going to say, oh, you're lying. But if I send the wagons, the father will know it's me, because only thy father knows what we learned together. And the word for wagon and the word for what we learned together is very similar. So it says that he sent the wagons for that reason, and the father saw the wagons, and it inspired him that his son is alive. Right? And he understood that. And that's where we see this story again. But this is where it is in the Torah, this section here. And it teaches us how serious welcoming a person is, taking care of someone is. Somebody comes into your city, even if he's a know-it-all, even if he's a meshuggah, you have a responsibility to take care of him. You can't let them just wander the streets and get hurt. We have a responsibility to them, right? Even to a stranger, even to someone who's not well. We have to do that. So the whole idea that we can tolerate homeless people and we can tolerate all types of these problems that we have in our society is really not a positive thing for us. We should be helping in every way that we can, because we're responsible for people. Even we didn't invite them to our city. I didn't ask this guy. He's a meshuggah. I tell him, don't go out at night to walk from this city to the next city. You're going to get killed. Nah, no one's going to bother me. I said, you're an idiot. Don't do it. If he goes and does it, who's responsible, him or me? He should be responsible. But the Torah says, no, you're responsible. You still have to take care of him. Even if he thinks he's a know-it-all, he knows it all, he knows better than you still are responsible. So that's how that concludes.